The streets of New York buzzed with life as the sun set behind the towering skyscrapers. In a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, Ethan Carter sat in front of his laptop, scrolling through casting calls. His fingers hesitated over the mousepad as he read the same phrases over and over. Experience required. Must have agency representation. Only established actors considered. He sighed. Ethan had dreamed of acting since he was a kid. He wasn't just another hopeful chasing stardom. He lived and breathed the craft. As a boy in Ohio, he would perform for his family in their tiny living room, mimicking scenes from classic films and television shows. His parents always encouraged him, but deep down they worried about his future. Acting is a tough business, his father would say. Only a few make it. But Ethan was never the kind to give up. After high school, he packed his bags and moved to New York with nothing but $500 in his pocket and an unshakable determination to make it in Hollywood. Starting in the theater scene, he juggled multiple side jobs, waiting tables, bartending, even delivering food on a bicycle, to pay rent while attending every audition he could find. Years passed, and the rejections piled up. You don't have the look. You're too old to be a newcomer. You need more credits on your resume. Some directors were polite, others were brutally dismissive. Ethan kept pushing forward, but self-doubt crept in like an uninvited guest. One evening, after yet another unsuccessful audition, he found himself sitting alone in a small cafe, stirring a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Was this a fool's dream? Would he ever get his chance? Just as he was about to leave, a man in his late 40s approached him. You look like someone who needs to hear something good, the man said with a knowing smile. Ethan looked up, confused. Excuse me? The man slid into the seat across from him. You remind me of myself 20 years ago. A struggling actor, waiting for a break. But let me tell you something. Opportunity doesn't always knock. Sometimes you have to kick the door open yourself. Ethan stared at the man sitting across from him. He had the aura of someone who had seen the ups and downs of life. His eyes carried wisdom, his posture, confidence. Who are you? Ethan asked, skeptical yet intrigued. The man chuckled. Just someone who's been where you are. The name's Michael Donovan. I was once a struggling actor just like you. Thought about quitting 100 times. But I didn't. And you shouldn't either. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's just, I've been at this for years. I moved here with big dreams, but now, I'm barely scraping by. Every audition ends in rejection. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Michael leaned in. Tell me something, kid. Why do you act? Ethan hesitated, then answered. Because it's what I love. It's the only thing that makes me feel alive. Michael nodded. Then that's all the reason you need to keep going. The industry is brutal, but talent and persistence always win. Do you know how long it took me to land my first real role? 12 years. 12 years of working side jobs, sleeping on couches, eating instant noodles. But when my moment came, I was ready. And when your moment comes, you better be ready too. Ethan exhaled slowly. He wanted to believe those words, but the weight of countless failures still sat heavy on his chest. So what do I do? Just keep failing until something works? Michael smirked. No, you stop waiting. You create your own opportunities. Ethan frowned. How? Michael pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Meet me at this address tomorrow at 10 a.m. You're about to learn the real game of this industry. Ethan hesitated but then took the card. As Michael stood to leave, he turned back and said, You're either in or you're out. No more doubting yourself. As Ethan sat there, staring at the card in his hand, something shifted inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point he had been waiting for. The next morning, Ethan stood outside a nondescript brick building in downtown Manhattan, gripping the business card Michael had given him. Donovan Acting Studio was printed in bold letters. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The space was larger than he expected. A mix of a rehearsal hall and an office. A few actors were gathered in small groups, running lines and discussing scenes. At the far end of the room, Michael stood with a script in hand, directing a young actress. When he noticed Ethan, he smiled. Right on time. Good. Ethan hesitated. What is this place? My workshop, Michael said, gesturing around. Actors come here to sharpen their craft, to learn what they don't teach in drama school. The industry is changing, Ethan. If you wait for Hollywood to discover you, you'll be waiting forever. You have to force them to notice you. Ethan crossed his arms. And how do I do that? Michael tossed him a script. By making your own opportunities. You want to act? Then act. Create. Don't wait for some casting director to give you permission. Ethan skimmed the lines. Intense, raw dialogue from a dramatic scene. He looked up. You want me to perform this? Michael nodded. Right now. No overthinking. Just go for it. Ethan swallowed hard. He hadn't performed in front of a group in a long time. But as he stepped forward, something inside him clicked. He focused, channeled his emotions, and delivered the lines with everything he had. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Michael grinned. Not bad, kid. You've got talent. But talent alone won't get you there. Are you ready to do the real work? Ethan met his gaze and, for the first time in a long while, felt something stir inside him. Hope. I'm ready. Michael clapped his hands, breaking the silence. All right, now that I know you've got something in you, it's time to see if you can handle the real pressure. Ethan wiped the sweat from his palms. What do you mean by real pressure? Michael smirked. You're going to write, produce, and act in your own short film. No waiting for auditions, no hoping for callbacks. You create your own damn opportunity. Ethan blinked. A short film? But I don't know anything about filmmaking. Michael leaned in. That's an excuse. You live in the digital age, kid. People are making entire films with nothing but a phone and an idea. If you're serious about this, you'll figure it out. Ethan hesitated. The thought of putting himself out there, not just as an actor but as a filmmaker, terrified him. But wasn't that what had been holding him back all these years? Fear? Michael crossed his arms. Look, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you want to be an actor, then act. The more you put yourself in front of the camera, the better you get. Build your own audience. Get noticed on your terms. The days of waiting for a big break are over. You either create or you get left behind. Ethan took a deep breath. And if I fail? Michael smiled. Then you try again, and again, until you don't fail. Ethan looked around at the actors rehearsing, the passion in their eyes. They weren't waiting. They were working. For the first time in his life, he realized something. He had been waiting for permission to chase his dream. But dreams don't come with permission slips. He clenched his fists and looked Michael in the eye. All right, I'll do it. Michael grinned. Good. You start today. Ethan sat at his tiny apartment desk, a blank notebook in front of him. His fingers hovered over the pen, his mind racing. A short film. Where did he even start? Michael had been blunt. No excuses, no waiting, just create. But creating something from nothing? That was terrifying. He picked up his phone and started researching. He read articles, watched YouTube videos on indie filmmaking, and took notes. The more he learned, the more he realized he didn't need a Hollywood budget. He just needed a good story, a camera, and the guts to make it happen. After hours of brainstorming, an idea struck him. A story about a struggling actor who's on the verge of giving up, only to find his breakthrough in the most unexpected way. It was personal. It was real. It was his story. Excitement bubbled inside him as he scribbled notes. He envisioned the shots, the scenes, the emotions. He could already see it coming to life. Then came the hard part, making it happen. He grabbed his phone and started calling every aspiring actor and filmmaker he had met over the years. Some ignored him, some brushed him off, but a few were excited. We're in, they said. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was taking action. The next morning, he met with Michael and told him the plan. Michael nodded approvingly. Good. Now, you need two things, a camera and a location. You don't need fancy equipment, just something that works. And you need to secure a place to shoot. Ethan hesitated. I don't have a budget for locations. Michael smirked. Then find a way. Use your apartment, the streets, a friend's place, be resourceful. The best filmmakers are. Ethan realized something at that moment. The industry didn't owe him a chance. He had to take it. With determination burning in his chest, he grabbed his notebook. It was time to make his dream real. Ethan spent the next few days reaching out to people. Friends, struggling actors, indie filmmakers, anyone who might believe in his project. Some were excited, others skeptical. No budget? One actor scoffed. Good luck with that. But Ethan refused to let rejection slow him down. If Hollywood wouldn't give him a chance, he'd build his own stage. Finally, after countless calls and messages, he had a small but passionate team. Liam, a film student who owned a DSLR camera and was eager to gain experience. Sophie, a theater actress who understood the struggles of aspiring talent. Danny, a bartender by night, a scriptwriter by passion. Jenna, an editor who had worked on small projects and wanted something fresh for her portfolio. They met at Ethan's apartment, crammed into his tiny living room. He laid out his vision, his excitement contagious. This isn't just a short film, he said. This is a statement. We're showing the world that talent doesn't wait for permission. Liam adjusted his glasses. I'm in, but we need to move fast. No funding means no time to waste. Sophie nodded. And we need locations. Where are we filming? Ethan took a deep breath. I've got a few ideas. The next morning, he hit the streets, knocking on doors, talking to cafe owners, pleading for free locations. Most turned him down. Sorry, we don't allow filming. But after relentless persistence, a small diner owner agreed. You've got one night after we close, the man said. Make it count. Ethan grinned. He was making it happen. That night, as he stood in the empty diner, looking at his makeshift film crew setting up, he realized this was real. He wasn't an aspiring actor anymore. He was a filmmaker. Ethan stood in the dimly lit diner, heart pounding. The moment had arrived. His dream was no longer a distant fantasy. It was happening. Liam adjusted the camera settings. Okay, we're rolling in 5 minutes. Sophie ran through her lines one last time, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Danny was in the corner, adjusting last-minute script details. Jenna, the editor, hovered behind Liam, analyzing the framing. Ethan took a deep breath. All right, everyone. We don't have Hollywood budgets, and we don't have all night. But we do have passion. Let's make something we're proud of. The crew nodded in unison. Liam called out, Scene 1, take 1. And action. Ethan stepped into character, slipping into the mindset of a struggling actor grappling with self-doubt. Something that wasn't too far from reality. The lines flowed naturally, emotions raw and unfiltered. Sophie delivered her dialogue with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. The chemistry was electric, their frustrations, fears, and hopes bleeding into every word. When the scene ended, silence filled the room. Jenna whispered, That was incredible. Liam grinned. If the rest of the film is like this, we're onto something special. Ethan exhaled. This was his moment. After years of waiting for a break, he was creating his own. The crew worked tirelessly through the night, shooting scene after scene, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. There were mishaps, missed lines, camera malfunctions, background noise, but they adapted. They had no time for perfection, only execution. By sunrise, the final scene wrapped. As Ethan looked around at his exhausted but beaming crew, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just a short film. It was proof that he belonged in this industry. No more waiting, no more doubts. He was ready for the world to see what he could do. With filming wrapped, the next challenge began, editing. Ethan had never worked in post-production before, but he trusted Jenna's expertise. They crammed into her tiny studio apartment, where her laptop and dual monitors became the heart of their project. The footage played on the screen, raw and unpolished, but alive. Jenna cracked her knuckles. All right, guys, editing makes or breaks a film. We need the right pacing, the right mood, and most importantly, the right impact. Ethan leaned forward. Let's make it real. No flashy gimmicks. Just raw emotion. For the next 3 weeks, they lived in that tiny editing room. Jenna stitched the clips together while Ethan and Liam worked on color correction and sound design. Danny fine-tuned the script's final subtitles, ensuring every word hit hard. There were frustrating nights, technical glitches, audio issues, moments of doubt, but they powered through. This was bigger than just a short film now. This was proof that they could create something great despite the odds. Finally, one evening, Jenna leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. It's done. Ethan's heart pounded. They watched the final cut in silence. The performances, the lighting, the cinematography, it all blended together perfectly. When the screen faded to black, no one spoke. Then Sophie whispered, "We did it." Ethan exhaled, a weight lifting off his shoulders. "We're not done yet. Now we have to show it to the world." Liam grinned. "Film festivals?" Ethan nodded. "And online platforms. This story needs to be seen." They had started with nothing, no budget, no studio backing, no famous names. But now they had something more valuable, a finished film that could change everything. The real test was about to begin. Would the world notice? Ethan didn't know. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to find out. Ethan sat at his laptop, his finger hovering over the submit button. The short film, titled Breaking Point, was ready to be sent to film festivals. Sophie leaned over his shoulder. "Are you nervous?" Ethan exhaled, more like terrified. "What if no one cares?" Danny smirked. "Then we make them care. You've come this far. There's no turning back now." They submitted Breaking Point to every festival they could afford. Small indie festivals, student showcases, online competitions. Some had expensive entry fees, forcing them to be selective. But Ethan didn't just rely on festivals. He uploaded the film to YouTube and Vimeo, writing a heartfelt description about their journey. Then he sent it to blogs, indie film critics, and social media pages that supported new filmmakers. Liam, ever the strategist, created a trailer and shared it on Instagram and Twitter. "We need to create buzz. If we get enough views, people will start noticing." The waiting game began. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. The first rejection email arrived. Then another. Then another. Ethan felt the old doubts creeping in. Maybe the industry really was impossible to break into. Maybe this was just another failed attempt. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, Sophie's phone rang. She answered it, eyes widening. "Ethan, it's the Indie Vision Film Festival. They loved our film." Ethan bolted upright. "Are you serious? They want Breaking Point to be screened in their upcoming showcase." Liam let out a yell. Jenna started crying. Danny high-fived Ethan so hard his palm stung. For the first time, someone in the film industry had recognized their work. It wasn't Hollywood yet, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to prove that you're on the right path. Ethan clenched his fists, fire igniting inside him. This was just the beginning. Ethan could hardly believe it. His film, Breaking Point, was officially going to be screened at a film festival. After years of struggling, rejection, and self-doubt, he finally had a foot in the door. The Indie Vision Film Festival was small but respected. Many filmmakers had used it as a launchpad to bigger opportunities. It wasn't Hollywood, but it was the kind of validation he had dreamed of. On the night of the screening, Ethan and his team arrived at the venue, a modest but elegant theater in Brooklyn. Posters of various indie films lined the entrance. Their film was on the list. Sophie nudged Ethan. "See that? Breaking Point right there with the others. We belong here." He smiled, trying to keep his nerves in check. Inside, the room was dimly lit. Filmmakers, critics, and indie film enthusiasts filled the seats. As the event organizer took the stage and introduced the first film, Ethan felt his hands grow clammy. Then, finally, it was their turn. The screen lit up with the opening scene of Breaking Point. Ethan held his breath as the audience watched. Every moment, every emotion, every struggle he had poured into the film played out before their eyes. When the credits rolled, there was a moment of silence. Then applause. Not just polite claps, but real, Enthusiastic applause. A well-dressed man in the front row leaned over to someone and whispered, pointing at the screen. Another nodded approvingly. People were talking about their work. After the screening, a few attendees approached them. "That was incredible," one woman said. "Raw, emotional. You captured something real." A man in his 40s shook Ethan's hand. "I'm a producer. You've got talent. I'd love to talk about what you're working on next." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had spent years waiting for someone to notice him. Now, they finally were. Ethan shook the producer's hand, still trying to process what had just happened. "You really think I have talent?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The producer, Richard Hayes, chuckled. "Kid, I don't waste my time with people who don't. Your film had something most indie projects lack. Authenticity. That's what Hollywood is looking for these days." Ethan glanced at his team, who were watching eagerly. This moment felt surreal, a real producer interested in his work. Richard pulled out a card. "I have a small production company that works with up-and-coming talent. We help indie filmmakers turn short films into full-length features. If you have an idea for a full-length film, let's talk." Ethan hesitated. He had spent years dreaming about a moment like this. But was he truly ready? Could he handle making a feature film? Danny nudged him. "Dude, if you say no, I swear I'm gonna slap you." Ethan laughed nervously and took the card. I'd love to discuss it." Richard smiled. "Good. Call me Monday. I'll set up a meeting with my team." As the producer walked away, Ethan turned to his team. "Did that just happen?" Sophie grinned. Yes, it did." Liam clapped him on the back. "And it happened because you made your own opportunity." Ethan looked around the festival, seeing other filmmakers networking, discussing future projects, making things happen. He had spent so long waiting for a big break when, in reality, he had built it himself. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at Richard's business card, one thought consumed his mind. This was just the beginning. For the first time, he didn't just dream about success. He could see it. Monday morning arrived faster than Ethan expected. He barely slept, his mind racing with ideas. A full-length feature film. This was a chance people in the industry waited their whole lives for. But now that it was real, he felt the pressure. He sat at his desk, staring at a blank page. He needed to come up with a film idea worthy of Richard's interest. Something bigger than Breaking Point. Something that could make waves. His phone buzzed. Richard Hayes. Ethan took a deep breath and answered. "Morning, Ethan," Richard said. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Ethan replied, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. "Good. Meet me at my office at noon. Bring your best idea." Ethan hung up and turned to his team. "All right, guys. We need a pitch and we need it now." They brainstormed furiously, throwing out ideas. Some felt too safe, others too ambitious. Then it hit him. "What if," Ethan said, voice steady, "we expand Breaking Point into a feature? The story of an actor on the edge of giving up, but with even deeper struggles. We go further into his backstory, show the weight of rejection, the sacrifices, the reality of chasing a dream. A story Hollywood has never told from the inside." The room went silent. Danny leaned forward. "That is brilliant." Sophie nodded. "It's your story, Ethan. And it's real." Ethan grinned, adrenaline rushing through his veins. "Then let's make it happen." At noon, he stepped into Richard's sleek office. The walls were lined with posters of past films. Some indie hits, others Hollywood successes. Richard leaned back in his chair. "All right, kid. What have you got?" Ethan took a deep breath, steadied himself, and pitched like his future depended on it. Because in many ways it did. Ethan sat across from Richard, his hands resting on the table to keep them from shaking. This was it. He took a deep breath and began. "I want to expand Breaking Point into a feature-length film," he said. "A raw, unfiltered look at the struggles of a dreamer in the entertainment industry. The rejection, the self-doubt, the sacrifices. But most importantly, the fight to keep going when the world tells you to quit." Richard studied him, his face unreadable. "So, A film about a struggling actor? Haven't we seen that before? Ethan expected that. He leaned forward. Not like this. Hollywood loves stories of success, but they rarely show the years of struggle before that success. The people who almost made it but didn't. The ones who had to reinvent themselves to survive. Richard's interest peaked. Go on. Ethan's confidence grew. This film will hit hard because it's real. It won't be sugar-coated or filled with cliches. It will show the truth, the loneliness, the countless additions, the odd jobs to survive. The moment when you wonder if you should give up. And then the breakthrough. But not in some fairy tale way. The real kind. The kind you fight for with everything you have. Silence hung in the air. Richard tapped his fingers on the desk, deep in thought. Then he smirked. You know what? I like it. Ethan's breath caught. Did he just say yes? But, Richard continued, an idea is only as good as the execution. Can you handle writing a full script? Can you lead a production? Can you make me believe this is worth investing in? Ethan didn't hesitate. He met Richard's gaze head-on. Give me a month, he said. I'll bring you a script you won't be able to ignore. Richard grinned. All right, kid. Let's see if you can back up your words. Ethan walked out of that office with the biggest challenge of his life ahead of him. And he was ready. Ethan had 1 month to deliver a full-length script. 1 month to prove he wasn't just another dreamer. 1 month to change his life. He locked himself in his apartment, stocking up on coffee and energy bars. Every morning, he woke up at 6 a.m., opened his laptop, and wrote until his eyes burned. The first week was brutal. He second-guessed every line, every scene. Was it good enough? Was it too personal? Would anyone care? Doubt clawed at him, but he refused to stop. Sophie checked in daily. Take a break, Ethan. You're running yourself into the ground. I don't have time for breaks, he muttered, his fingers still flying over the keyboard. Danny helped refine the dialogue. Liam gave feedback on the pacing. The team believed in him. That was enough to keep him going. By week 3, the script started coming together. The protagonist, a struggling actor on the verge of giving up, felt real because Ethan poured his own fears and failures into him. By week 4, the final draft was complete. 120 pages of blood, sweat, and soul. He printed it out and stared at the stack of paper. This wasn't just a script. It was his story, his fight, his proof that he was ready. On the last day of the deadline, he walked into Richard's office and placed the script on the table. Richard raised an eyebrow. You actually did it? Ethan met his gaze. Read it, and then tell me if I'm ready. Richard smirked and picked up the script. I like your confidence, kid. Let's see if the writing matches it. Ethan left the office, his fate now resting on those pages. He had given it everything. Now all he could do was wait. The wait was unbearable. Every day, Ethan checked his phone, hoping for a call from Richard. Every hour felt like an eternity. His entire future rested on one thing, the script. Days passed. Then a week. Silence. Doubt started creeping in again. What if it wasn't good enough? What if I ruined my only chance? He muttered to himself one night. Sophie, noticing his stress, tried to reassure him. Richard's a busy guy, Ethan. If he hated it, he would have told you by now. No news is good news. But Ethan wasn't convinced. Then, on the 10th day, his phone rang. Richard Hayes. His heart pounded as he answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a chuckle. You sure you've never written a feature film before? Richard asked. Ethan swallowed hard. No, sir. Because this, Richard said, is damn good. Ethan almost dropped the phone. Wait. Seriously? Richard laughed. Kid, I wouldn't waste my time if I didn't mean it. Your script has heart. It's raw, it's powerful, and it's marketable. I see potential. But, Ethan's stomach dropped. There's always a but. But you're still new. No studio is going to hand you a huge budget right away. So here's what I'm offering. You co-produce the film, we bring in an experienced director, and we get this made. Ethan's breath caught. You're serious? This is really happening. As serious as a Hollywood deal can get, Richard replied. We'll start pre-production soon. Welcome to the industry, kid. The call ended. Ethan stood frozen, his mind reeling. Sophie grabbed his arm. Well, what happened? Ethan turned to his friends, his voice barely a whisper. We're making a movie. Liam whooped. Danny fist-pumped the air. Jenna wiped away tears. After years of struggle, rejection, and waiting, the moment had arrived. Ethan wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. He was living it. Ethan barely had time to process the news before things started moving fast. Too fast. Within days, Richard introduced him to a team of industry professionals, a director, cinematographer, and executive producers. They weren't big Hollywood names, but they were seasoned in the indie film world, having worked on projects that had gone to major festivals and streaming platforms. Sitting in a conference room at Richard's production company, Ethan felt out of place. He was the youngest one there, the least experienced. Yet, here he was co-producing his first feature film. The director, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Morgan, flipped through the script. Ethan, I love this story. It's real. But we'll need to tweak a few things for pacing. Ethan nodded, his nerves making his hands sweat. Of course. One of the producers leaned forward. We've got a modest budget, so we have to be smart. No fancy locations. We'll need to shoot fast and keep costs low. Ethan understood. He wasn't expecting a blockbuster production. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that his story was being told. Then came the big question. Lisa looked at Richard. So, who plays the lead? Richard turned to Ethan. That depends. Ethan, do you want to act in this? Or are you focusing on producing? The room went silent. This was his story. He had fought for this moment. And now he had to decide, was he ready to step in front of the camera on a major project? Ethan's pulse pounded. He looked around the table, then at Richard. He clenched his fists and took a deep breath. I wrote this story because it's personal. If I'm going to tell it, I need to live it on screen. Richard studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then let's find you the best cast to support you. Time to make this film a reality. Ethan exhaled, realizing something. This wasn't just a dream anymore. This was his life now. With the production officially moving forward, casting became the next big step. Ethan had always been on the other side of auditions, the one desperately hoping to get picked. Now he was the one watching actors fight for a role in his film. Sitting in a rented studio space, he and the casting director watched dozens of hopefuls come in, each delivering their best performances. Some were amazing, others not so much. But as the hours dragged on, Ethan couldn't shake a strange feeling. He saw himself in every actor who walked into that room. The nervous ones, the confident ones, the ones who fumbled their lines but still pushed through. He had been in their shoes for years. Then came Samantha Reed. The moment she started reading for the lead female role, Ethan knew. She wasn't just playing the part. She was the part. Lisa, the director, leaned over to Ethan. She's got it, doesn't she? Ethan nodded. Yeah, she's perfect. When they told Samantha she had the role, she gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God, really? Ethan smiled. Yes, you earned it. She blinked back tears. I've been waiting for a break for so long. Thank you. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He knew that feeling. By the end of the week, the cast was locked in. A mix of experienced and first-time actors, just like him. As they stood together for the first official cast and crew meeting, Ethan looked around. This wasn't just a film anymore. It was a team, a family, a movement. Lisa clapped her hands. All right, folks. We have a script, a cast, and a vision. Now, let's go make a damn good movie. Ethan grinned. It was finally happening. And this time, he wasn't just waiting for a role. He was making one. The first day of filming felt unreal. Ethan arrived on set before dawn, heart pounding. The makeshift film crew bustled around, setting up lights, cameras, and sound equipment. This wasn't a small passion project anymore. It was a real production. Lisa, the director, walked over and patted him on the back. You ready for this? Ethan swallowed hard. I think so. She smirked. Good. Because once we start rolling, there's no turning back. The cast huddled together. Samantha, his co-star, grinned. Let's make something amazing. Ethan nodded. This was it. The assistant director clapped the slate. Scene 1, take 1, and action. Ethan took a deep breath, stepped into character, and the world around him faded. He was no longer just Ethan Carter, the struggling actor. He was the character he had created, the man on the edge of giving up, the dreamer fighting against the odds. He was living his own story. When the first scene wrapped, the crew erupted into applause. Lisa smiled. Damn good take, Ethan. Sophie, standing behind the monitors, whispered, He's actually doing it. Danny grinned. We all are. Day after day, they worked tirelessly. Some scenes took hours to perfect. Others clicked instantly. They filmed in cheap apartments, dimly lit diners, and the very streets where Ethan had once delivered food to survive. One night, after an emotional scene, Lisa called cut and wiped her eyes. That was powerful, she murmured. Ethan let out a shaky breath. I wasn't acting. Lisa nodded. That's what makes it real. For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't chasing a dream. He was living it. As filming continued, one thought echoed in his mind. This movie is going to change everything. After 6 weeks of intense filming, the production was coming to an end. Ethan stood in the middle of a dimly lit alley, the final scene of the film. The entire crew had gathered, exhaustion visible on their faces, but so was pride. Lisa called out, All right, this is the last shot. People, let's make it count. Ethan took a deep breath, fully immersed in his character. This was the moment, the breaking point. The scene demanded raw emotion, a moment of complete surrender before hope rekindled inside his character. The cameras rolled. Ethan let go of everything, the years of struggle, the pain of rejection, the doubt, the fear. He poured it all into this scene, letting it fuel every tear, every shaky breath, every look of desperation. When Lisa called cut, silence filled the set. No one moved. Then applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that came when people witnessed something real. Lisa wiped her eyes. That was one of the best performances I've ever seen. Ethan stood there, breathless, heart pounding. He had left a piece of himself in that scene. Richard stepped forward. I knew you had talent, but that was next level. Samantha hugged him. You didn't just act, Ethan. You lived it. As the crew packed up the final pieces of equipment, it hit him. They had done it. No waiting, no hoping, no begging for someone to give them a shot. They had created their own chance. The movie was finished. Now the real challenge began, getting the world to see it. Ethan clenched his fists. He had come too far to stop now. Months passed. Editing, marketing, pitching. The film, now officially titled Breaking Point, was complete. But the hardest part was still ahead, getting people to watch it. Richard, as promised, used his connections. He sent the film to major indie film festivals. Ethan and his team reached out to social media influencers, film critics, and streaming platforms. But the waiting never got easier. Then, one night, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from Richard. Congratulations. Breaking Point has been accepted into the Sundance Film Festival. Ethan froze. Then he screamed. His team rushed in. What happened? Ethan, shaking, held up his phone. Sundance. We got into Sundance. For a moment there was silence. Then the room exploded with cheers. Liam lifted him off the ground. Sophie was crying. Danny was screaming into a pillow. Jenna sat in shock, whispering, We actually did it. Sundance was huge, the kind of festival that launched careers, got films noticed, and changed lives. Everything led to this moment. The theater was packed. Industry executives, producers, agents, and film lovers filled the seats. Ethan's hands shook as he waited for the lights to dim. When Breaking Point started playing, he held his breath. He relived every moment. The struggles, the rejection, the relentless fight to prove himself. Then the screen faded to black. For a moment, silence. Then a standing ovation. Ethan's breath hitched. People weren't just clapping. They were moved. A man in a suit approached him. "I'm from Netflix. We need to talk about distribution." Another executive chimed in. "This film has Oscar potential. Have you considered a theatrical release?" Ethan could barely process what was happening. He wasn't just another struggling actor anymore. He had created something that people believed in. Later that night, Ethan stood outside the theater, staring at the city lights. Richard walked up beside him. "How's it feel, kid?" Ethan exhaled, a smile spreading across his face. "It feels like I finally proved to the world. I was never waiting for a chance. I was building one." And for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter wasn't chasing a dream. He was living it.